Welcome back. On Tokyo on Fire, we focus exclusively on the critical issues that are facing Japan. The Prime Minister was in Lima. He was in Buenos Aires. He's been talking to leaders of other countries that are very important and critical to the Japan relationship. Michael, he had a hot meeting with President Putin.
That may be not, I would not use the word hot. I would say awkward, maybe not unpleasant.
Meaningful.
Meaningful. They met for quite a number of minutes, and the minister in charge of the Russo-Japanese relationship, Seko Hiroshige, presented an 8-point plan for economic cooperation.
We've done that before.
And he had that, and then they had a private meeting afterward. But from the way that Mr. Abe was speaking and talking after the meeting, and the way that Putin, who normally is in complete control, was speaking, but looking and before the meeting, this seems to have gone really badly.
There are so many balls in the air. I mean, I'm so glad that we have Tokyo on Fire to discuss these things, because things are happening now at a rate that is just really stunning. We're talking about the Northern Territories issues. We're talking about, what's going on with TPP. A lot of things have happened within the context of just 2 weeks.
Yeah, and in this case, the APEC summit, which is about the coordination of the economies throughout the Asia-Pacific region, and has been the framework for the smaller groupings, such as TPP and RCEP, that it was at this meeting on the sidelines that Abe and Putin were going to have their final setup meeting for the Putin summit, whereas Putin is not in a multilateral setting, but in a bilateral setting with one of the major allies of the West. Mm-hmm. It's a strange way of putting it, seeing how it's global in scale, but nevertheless, the Western alliance that have been shutting him out because of Crimea and what's happening in Ukraine. This was supposed to be the final setup meeting, but suddenly, with the eruption of the Trump presidency, I sensed it was really cold, and that Putin was just not engaged in it. It just wasn't for him anymore.
Yes, you went to see Mr. Trump instead of. Was that a slight? I didn't think that it was, but I've heard that perhaps Putin thought, what are you doing visiting with Donald Trump
instead of with me? Because
you were scheduled to come here directly. Why did you stop in New York first?
Yeah, no, of course Putin understands why. But nevertheless, suddenly with the United States under a Trump presidency moving away from an antagonistic relationship toward Russia, and something else, we don't know quite what it is, because we simply don't know we don't know anything about his administration right now. But nevertheless, it's supposed to be different. Suddenly, Putin seems to be pushing on the brakes really hard, and Abe comes out of this meeting and says, well, it's not going to be a simple thing to do, to have some kind of territorial issue worked out. It's going to be something we do step by step. And you say, whoa, wait a minute. Mm-hmm. This is the last chance before the summit to put some tinsel on it and make it all bright and seem like it's going to be a great time.
About 3 weeks away?
Yeah, and instead it was an incredible downer. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. Then Abe went to Buenos Aires and he met with the president there and had a very nice meeting. Some people were sort of making comments about the fact that suddenly a Trump project that was there got done during this time, and it was all these other ancillary things. But the summit between the two countries, Japan and Argentina, went really well. There's a beautiful photograph of the wives and the husbands having a nice meal together, where of course it's summertime in Argentina right now, so they looked rather comfortable. But he then is coming back, and the bombshell hits.
Right.
Trump, via this really, I hope this is not the way he's going to communicate with the American people, but via that videotape says, day one, I'm going to say we're moving out of the TPP.
Mm-hmm. And the prime minister said, but wait a minute, I gave you a golf club and everything, and I thought you were somebody that I could trust, and you were a person that we could deal with.
Yeah, and that
Didn't tell him that part, did he?
Did he? Well, of course, Mr. Abe is not going to say, Trump betrayed me, or that because he didn't. There was no promise there. Of course,
Right. Well, I mean, nobody knows what the context of the conversation was in the first place.
Yeah, but it came even before he had come back, and that the United States was definitely pulling out. Now, Mr. Abe, before he left, said that if TPP was truly not functioning, Japan would move on to the China-dominated RCEP, Regional Economic Cooperation idea that's there, that partnership. And he hasn't said anything about that since that statement before his departure. But he certainly said that with TPP without the United States is meaningless, 意味がない. And there's nothing more clear that whatever the strategic implications of the TPP are, which are very important if you're trying to quietly surround China with allies of the United States that are linked together in an economic network. Though no one will ever say that out loud because immediately that would ruin their bilateral relationship with China. But that idea without the United States doesn't exist. Japan is just not attractive enough.
Right.
And Mr. Abe is, he's owning up to that.
Yeah. It's not quite a vacuum, but it appears to be a vacuum that is being created, and the Russians seem to be wanting to move into that. So, for example, in the Northern Territories, they are moving missile systems into the two islands, and this is a new development that's just come up and hit the press over the last couple of days. They're doing the same thing in the Crimea.
And the thing is, if you read the Russian press, they're really walking back from anything that Putin may have said about friendly or starting over. He frequently uses judo terms like hajime in order to show that he has some kind of sympathy toward Japan's position. But nevertheless, the Russians seem to be putting all kinds of resources and now military hardware into the islands, which, if there's some kind of territorial deal, makes no sense whatsoever.
Right. There was a report of an anti-submarine helicopter also approaching the Senkakus.
The Senkakus, which is on the completely, it's in the East China Sea. But
in context of all of this going on, I mean, this is rather meaningful.
It's meaningful, but the thing is, it's just, if this is a warming of relations, goodness gracious,
right?
Who is this for? The audience for? And it's just a big come down for the prime minister. That being said, the opposition has gotten absolutely zero traction out of any of the prime minister's misfortunes.
What's happened with them? You would have thought that as a champion for not going with TPP, they would be waving the flag as soon as the prime minister said, "Imiganai."
We were right. We told you. Don't mess with the calendar for the extraordinary session. Don't have all these.
We were right.
You had your ministers that made mistaken statements about railroading, but they wanted to railroad through the legislation in order to have it done by the U.S. election, as if that was going to some way change the votes of a few folks in the Midwest, which was where the battle was being fought. If anything, having the TPP announced would have probably sunk that place even worse in terms of voting. But nevertheless, the opposition, after being absolutely correct about the entire span, gets zero credit.
Well, maybe they're fighting internally about who is going to go in front of the cameras.
Maybe, but you would have thought, there should have been at least one childish member of the opposition going, nah, 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 nah. Because that's your right in the political system. If you were correct and the prime minister comes back with egg on his face, you're supposed to laugh at him.
Right.
But it just doesn't work.
So in the context of the three arrows that the prime minister has touted for a long time, TPP was one of the anchor points of the third arrow.
Absolutely. Absolutely, in terms of the growth of the economy that was supposed to happen in the first of the new three arrows, when we have a 600 trillion yen economy. Now, what's the growth engine? Is it womenomics? Yeah, that's also in the mix. They have, in fact, stepped back from the womenomics point of view. In fact, they are really, really not wanting to deal with the special tax treatment for women who work part-time that they get if they have a spouse who works full-time. They bailed on that. They just got too frightened of the possible repercussions from the Komeito, which brings up this question of, with all of this happening, reversals on the TPP, a cold meeting with Putin, what has happened to the possibility of having a snap election?
That one is looking farther and farther from reality.
It's real. I mean, the whole legislative calendar, all of the planning, even the big summit with Putin was all framing for what was supposed to be a brief opening of the Diet. Then we go to an election. They get back together, slam through a budget, and then bingo, Mr. Abe goes into an LDP meeting where they finally vote and say, yes, you can have a third term as LDP president and be prime minister until 2021. Whew, it's gone.
The Abe-Putin relationship portends so much for Japan, and it infiltrates so many other things. For example, the snap election, what's going to happen in Yamaguchi in less than 3 weeks' time. Please stay tuned. We're going to continue to watch this.